Right. I've got 10 on the dot. You ready to rumble?
Let's get ready to rumble. I'm ready.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the July Real Talk about Real Estate. My name is Michelle, and I'm the marketing lead for the ABR designation. Today, I'm joined by Robert Morris from Advanced Training and Seminars, and we will be chatting about how to develop a value proposition as a buyer's rep. As a reminder, we are live, so if you have any comments or questions, feel free to let us know, and we'll do our best to answer them. Robert, why should homebuyers hire an ABR?
Well, Michelle, thank you and welcome as well this morning. Thank you for having me in the group that is with us today. That is a quality question, and I'm glad you asked it. That is something that is of paramount importance to us. And so, since you asked that, I thought maybe I'd share with you on the slide deck a couple of ideas to help us as we move through today. First thing I want all of us to know as ABRs that we are advocates for the buyers that we actually represent in a transaction, because it's the single most important thing. It's the largest purchase that they'll ever make in their lives, and we need to take that into consideration. We need to know also that people need an expert, right, that they can trust for guidance and advice. And as ABRs, that is what we actually bring to the table as well. And then, of course, being that expert, you're going to be the buyer's advocate in their transactions so that they can feel comfortable about the things that they're about to do. So what do they actually want? Well, they want to be able to be with someone who can find them the right home at the right price under the right terms. And I know that sounds trivial because, yeah, that's kind of what everybody wants, but they're really serious about this and what they talk about. They want us to serve as a trusted guide to help them through the process. No matter how many homes that they bought or haven't bought, the experience is always a unique experience. And we need to remember that as we go through. And we need to protect the client's interest. What is the best position for them to do? And sometimes that means even telling them what they don't want to hear. You know, everybody talks about, well, I represent a buyer and I want to tell them all the good stuff. But we also say you need to tell them the stuff that's not so good, so they can make an informed decision about what it is that they really need to do. And then lastly, we need to safeguard their confidential information. We create a fiduciary duty with them when we have a buyer's rep agreement that is signed. And that's sort of like a relationship between an attorney and their client, or even a physician and their patient. Those are the types of relationships that we create when we have buyer representation agreements. So we need to be cognizant and aware that it's important to safeguard all of their confidential information that they share with us. So those things are kind of important. And I know, Michelle, I'm making a long answer out of this, but the question that you asked was so encompassing. So we went to the NAR buyer seller profile, and NAR surveys buyers and sellers as to what their needs, wants, desires are, how did they come to find their agent, and so forth. So I went and found this statistical information. It says what buyers want most from their agents. And there were 3 top responses. Those responses were, help me find the right home to buy, help me negotiate the terms, and help me negotiate the price. These were the 3 highest areas that came up as to what they wanted from their agent. So as ABRs, this is what we emphasize when we're talking and we're doing our training, in that we need to be that advocate for what those buyers want if we want to be the agent of choice. So I think that is a critical point for that. And then, of course, we got great support tools. Here's one. Why work with an accredited buyer rep? Why would they work with us in the first place? These are tools that are made available to all of our ABRs, and it would be a great piece to put in your buyer consultation, or to be able to put and present at your actual interviews to help people assimilate and to make sense of why they would hire you in the first place. Michelle, that's my answer.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think it also helps, we call it alphabet soup here in the real estate industry. You can really help home buyers understand what the A, B, and R are after your name. It's not enough to just put it on your business card and hope that they'll understand. You have to actually show them your worth, your value. So Robert, what about the buyer representation agreement? Is that something that you would recommend?
Well, now that's another loaded question, Michelle, and I'll answer this way. Absolutely. Absolutely. You should actually not necessarily push, but look to get a buyer representation agreement signed every single time. And I'll go into detail. Why do we do this? Well, you see, a couple of things about our first meetings. They're kind of important. They set the tone for the buyer relationship with the agent that we actually have. And it's important to start learning about the buyer, what their needs, wants, and desires are. So once we do that, we can identify their situation. We can identify the length of the search period that they've been engaged in. We can look at what their home buying goals are. You know, close to work, close to home, close to parents, in an area that they're familiar with, whatever the case may be. And then, of course, it gives us an opportunity to share our value and our service. In other words, your unique value proposition. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. But I want you to know in the today's buyer's rep, the TBR, which is another tool that we actually have at our disposal. In the July issue, it talked about buyer representation agreements, and it asked the question, how often do you use a buyer representation agreement to formalize working relationship with a buyer? And it was interesting what our group came up with, and here's some of the data. They said that 59% of all ABRs always use a buyer rep agreement. And we're going like, yes, that is a good number. That number is slowly, gradually coming up, but it's not good enough, right? We have 22% that says that I sometimes use it. And then we have a 19% of our body that says that they never use a buyer rep agreement. And we're like, well, why? So we delve in there a little bit more. We ask a second question. What type of buyer rep agreements do you use of the ones that do use them? And we found this data to be interesting as well. I mean, 93% use an exclusive right to represent agreement, which is the ones that I recommend. They're highly effective in that. It says, you hire me to represent your interests, then I will get paid. Those are the kind that we really sort of want to have if we had a issue. Just like if we were doing a listing agreement, an exclusive right to sale agreement that we actually engage ourselves in under the listing side. Now, we noticed that 3% of them use non-exclusive rights to sale, which means they have the right to be able to find it on their own or maybe find another agent. So you go like, well, what's the purpose in that? And then we have 1% that have a non-exclusive with no compensation. A couple of issues we've been dealing with, if you know about some of the lawsuits that we're dealing with on the national level, one of them we've encountered is because agents have been saying it doesn't cost anything to use me. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. Every transaction has a cost associated with it. And the agents that are involved in that transaction are part of that cost. So when we actually tell a buyer that, you know, you can use me and it doesn't cost you anything because I'm going to get the seller side to pay for it, there is still a cost involved in that. So we're encouraging our agents to lose that particular conversation. It does cost for you to use a professional like me to help you make one of the most important decisions that you're going to make in your life. And here's what I bring to the table. So we need to start positioning ourselves with that at its cost. We had one more question. We said, well, what prevents you from even using a buyer rep agreement? And it was interesting, some of the responses that we got here as well. And they showed, says, well, 49% of them said, I'd rather remain flexible to make the decision on a case-by-case basis. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking that through. 32% say I prefer working on a trust basis. 15%, I'm concerned buyers will use another agent. And of course, as it falls down, I don't feel confident persuading buyers to sign. Well, here's what I'm going to say. You bring value to the table. You have gone through extensive training. You've made a commitment to excellence in your chosen field of endeavor. And you've earned the right to be an expert to display the alphabet soup ABR. What does that really mean to us? I think that One is a confidence level that we need to exude. And we also need to put the buyer on the spot to say, do you want an advocate representing your interest in the largest purchase that you're going to make? Or do you want just somebody who's a facilitator who really doesn't really get involved that way? Sort of like, would you go to court and represent yourself? Or would you want an attorney actually representing you, giving you good advice as to what you should and should not say and so forth? Or maybe even if you were a surgeon, but you needed to have your appendix removed, would you put yourself on the table and go under anesthesia and have yourself remove your own appendix? No, you have another specialist, which is what you are, to actually do that job for them. So when a person says, I'd rather remain flexible and make a decision on a case-by-case basis, I agree with that, but it should be made in your buyer presentation. In your buyer consultation is where you decide whether or not you want to work with an individual or not. You decide if you like them, if they're going to allow you to do what it is that you do, if they're going to allow you to give them advice and to absorb that advice to be able to make informed decisions, then yes, okay, but that would be made early in the transaction. Even the ones that say, I prefer working on a trust basis. I've been in real estate business for almost 37 years now. Yeah, I started when I was 2, and so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, right? But here's what I'll say to you. On a case-by-case basis, all of us have experience showing 10, 15, 20, 30 houses. We thought we had developed a rapport and a trust with someone. We took them out to lunch. We took them to dinner. They put bubble gum on the back seat. I mean, they did all of these things, and then they found a better deal. They said, well, you know, there was somebody else who was offering me a better deal. I believe in a trust basis. And that's why I believe in having a buyer rep agreement signed, because here's what it says. Those buyers are willing to stay with you. They're willing to allow you as a real estate professional to do your job in representing their interest. When I encounter buyers who are not willing to sign an agreement, which is a couple of pages, yet they're wanting to buy a house, so they got to sign 2 million pages. Oh, so these 2 pages they don't want to sign. That could be an indication up front that maybe these buyers would not be loyal. Maybe these buyers would not be the kind that would stay with you. When would you rather find that out? As early as possible in your transaction, so that you're not spinning your wheels with people who don't want to be doing business with you. So I think it serves a purpose in that. I'm concerned that the buyers, they are using another agent who doesn't require a signed agreement. Well, I got news for you. Not every agent's an ABR. You see, there are some agents who will just work with anybody and hope that they get paid at the end of the transaction. But you see, that's not who you are. You are committed to excellence in your chosen field of endeavor. And that is representation of buyer clients who really need your help and your services. So here's the rule. I'd rather work with 5 people that really want to work with me than to have 10 people who are suspect. What happens in a buyer agency agreement is those people have made a commitment to actually allow you to do what it is that you do. And I usually talk about that in the buyer consultation agreement. And I just tell them I'm going to be vigorously, selfishly, and notoriously representing your interest in the transaction. I'm going to commit my time, my energy, and efforts to helping you find the right home under the right terms and conditions where you want it to be. And with that commitment that I make to you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the only thing I ask is that you make the commitment to me that I would be the agent of choice that you use to take you through this process. Can we make that commitment to each other? I just asked the question. And guess what? They'll let you know in the buyer consultation whether or not you're going to have a loyal subject who's going to work with you throughout the transaction. So I think the buyer rep agreement is paramount in establishing a lot of pieces. The last one I'll say is I don't feel confident persuading buyers. You're not persuading buyers. You already know what you know. You're already an expert at what you do. You have experience and expertise, and you are there to help make their process easier. So you're not convincing them or persuading them to use you. All you're asking them is, wouldn't they want a professional who's knowledgeable in negotiations, who's knowledgeable in the contracts, who's knowledgeable into the marketplace, helping them find and secure the largest purchase that they'll ever make. And if they are those kind of individuals, then they owe it to themselves to put somebody like you to work for them. So it's not like you're doing something to persuade them to help you. Right. They need to recognize and understand that they need somebody like you to actually help them through the transaction. So that's why we teach when we talk about ABRs, and why we go through the different courses, and why we actually say to you all to continue training and continue putting good stuff in so that you can give good stuff out. And that builds your confidence up to say, I'm a professional. This is what I do. And if you'd like to put me to work for you, here's the form that'll do it for us. So I'm very much in favor of having buyer representation agreements. And we're hoping we can get this number up because it is in the agent's best interest and also the buyer client's best interest to have two sides working together to accomplish the common goal of buyer advocacy that they need. Right. That's why we would actually use those agreements. Now, here's the last piece. I'll wrap it in because we'll have the value proposition, but you need to get it signed. The importance of that, the buyer becomes your client. You create a fiduciary duty between the two of you. It protects the financial and the compensation pieces because we don't work for free. It does cost to use us and our professional skills and services. And it protects us from potentially serious legal consequences because we know what side we represent. It's not ambiguous. It's not left to chance. It says, I am a buyer representative. This is my buyer client, and this is who I advocate for. So when you look at all those pieces, they're good. Now, here's what agents make common mistakes about. You talk like and you act like the buyer rep without clarifying your relationship. In most states, you are a facilitator until there's an established agreement that creates a relationship between you. So if you're a facilitator, why would you be talking about issues and helping them solve things when you don't really represent their interest, right? The other thing is we don't discuss the contract to avoid pressuring the buyer. But in fact, we're not pressuring the buyer. We're giving them relief to let them know that we'll be there and that we have their back and we have their best interests at heart. And that's the way you guys should actually look at it. We rely on the state's default, where the state's default varies from state to state. And you know what? Buyers are not privy to what that is in most cases. So that's not a good reason as well. Or we assume the buyers know that you're working with them, that you're on their side. And is that by your actions, or is that by the words you use? Or would you want to provide them clarity that they've hired you to represent their best interests?
Never want to assume anything.
That's a crack. So true. So true.
Yeah.
So all of these pieces are. So there's another one sheet, 5 reasons to sign a buyer rep agreement. And if you have not reviewed this, again, the one sheets are made available, great tools that we have. All of the one sheets, I recommend that you read them before you actually use them, so that you know what they say and why you would use a buyer rep and why you would get one signed and so forth. And I would encourage you to incorporate these into your buyer presentations, which will work seamlessly to all of the wonderful pieces that you put together. Again, Michelle, another long answer, but thank you. That's it.
I just want to add, Robert's talking about our consumer one sheets, which can be found. I saw a question, where can we find this document? These are all in the member center at abr.realtor, and you also can get them customized with your contact information through the Reback print shop. So all that can be found in the member center at reback.net, and I'll drop, or excuse me, that's our old website, at abr.realtor, and I'll drop the link in once we're done here. So, Robert, any last thoughts about the unique value proposition?
As a matter of fact, sure. Michelle, you keep asking all of these difficult questions, and that's why I think you are the best. Let's talk value proposition just for a second before we call it done for the day. If you guys remember in ABR, this is one of the slides that we have. What is a value proposition? What do you bring to the table? What is your unique piece of why somebody should use you. And the ability to clearly articulate that to individuals is important. So what do you bring to the table? You have your expertise that you bring to the table. You got your education that you bring to the table, and you got your experience, your on-the-job training of what you've done in helping other people make their dreams come true. So you need to let people know, here's what ABRs bring. We have specialized training, blah, 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 and we'll put that out. We have expertise, our market knowledge and our product knowledge to help you. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? How might we position ourselves in the best place to get this offer? Or should we counter with this, that, or the other? Those pieces that come in. And then, of course, the experience that you bring to the table. All of these are things that encompass what your value proposition is. So when I tell you about it, you're able to identify properties. You're able to handle negotiations. You show the properties. You can talk about property comparisons. You can talk about structure, and you can talk about staging, and you can talk strategies and what happens at the closing. And so there's so many areas that you have. But here's the most important thing that I want you to be able to answer after you finish the call today. If I were to ask any of you on this call, why should I hire you? Why should I hire you as opposed to another realtor who's in the area? What would you tell them? When you go to tell them what it is that you bring to the table, you've got to show the benefit to them. No matter what it is that you bring to the table, what's the benefit to them to use you? So if you were to say, for example, I'm an experienced agent. I've been in the real estate business 15 years, and I know this area well. And if I'm a prospective buyer client, I'd say, well, so how does that help me in the process of buying a home? So I think that you need to add, based on the product or service, you need to add what is in it for them, because that's what human beings make decisions on. So if you told me that you would experience agent in the area, and you told me that you had been in for 15 years, you would also need to say, I've watched a lot of change in this area, and I've seen things grow. I understand the areas that are up and coming. I understand the areas are stable and so forth. And I think that I bring a nuance to the transaction that would help you find a home of your dreams within this community as well. That is important to you, isn't it? Well, you see, when you can relate something that you do as your value proposition, how does it benefit the person that you're talking to? I'll give you one more. If you say to me that you are, for whatever reason, a multi-million-dollar producer, and you've been in the business a while, and I would look at you, so okay, but how does that help me find a home?
Right.
All right. So Michelle, if I said to you, well, I don't really like to talk about how many millions I've sold. I like to talk about how many families I've served. But in that, I want you to know, Michelle, I think that I have encountered a lot of different situations in all of those transactions, which have prepared me to be better suited to handle any transaction or challenge that might come up with you. It's not to say that we won't see a new one, but I think with my years of experience and working with several families just like yours, I think I'm suited pretty good to help you make this process as seamless and as stress-free as possible for you and your family.
You're hired.
There we go. There we go. Those are value propositions. Always be able to tell people what you do, why you would hire you as an ABR, what does that mean to them, and how do they benefit from it. And I think as you build your value propositions in on whatever you care to share, I think that you will go a long way in this business toward more successful transactions. Value proposition.
Love it. Love it. I hope everyone's taken diligent notes on what Robert's saying here, because yeah, it is really important to show buyers why that ABR really matters in the home buying process. So, so Robert showed us some amazing ABR member resources. They come from the TBR, Today's Buyers Rep. You can catch the latest issue, the July issue, which was our trends issue. Again, in the member center at abr.realtor, has more data from the ABR member survey, which came out earlier this year. And yeah, like Robert's showing so nicely on his PowerPoint here, we've got the TBR hot sheet, which comes out every week, and also our amazing ABR referrals and networking community on Facebook. Those are all really great resources for you. Make sure that you're taking advantage of those as a Rebec member. So if there are any questions, let us know. We can answer them afterwards as well. But I just wanted to thank you so much, Robert. And everyone who joined us today. I hope that you feel prepared to create your own awesome value proposition. Please join us next week for a special edition of Real Talk. Lynn Madison will be here for part 2 of her June presentation, which will be all about appraisals. That's on July 22nd, so be sure to RSVP. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Very good.
All right, thank you.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Bye.